The chapel doors were propped open when I arrived, letting afternoon sunlight spill across polished wooden pews. I had followed my husband Vincent's location on our shared family tracking app, something we'd set up years ago for safety. The pin had led me here to St. Augustine's Chapel on Riverside Drive, 20 minutes from our home in Portland. I stepped inside quietly, my sneakers silent against the stone floor. That's when I saw the rehearsal board near the entrance, elegant script announcing the wedding party lineup. Under groom was printed Vincent Alexander Lowell, my husband's full legal name. The name I'd spoken at our own wedding 9 years ago. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going downstairs. A woman in a cream dress stood beside him at the altar, laughing at something he'd just said. Vincent looked relaxed, happy even, his hand resting casually on her lower back. I recognized that gesture. He used to touch me that way. I pressed myself against the back wall, hidden partially by a stone column, watching my husband rehearse wedding vows with a stranger. The officiant, an older man with silver hair, guided them through the ceremony structure with practiced ease. Vincent repeated lines I remembered from our own wedding, his voice carrying clearly through the empty chapel. The woman beside him had dark hair pulled into an elegant updo, her posture perfect as she smiled up at him. They looked like they'd done this before, comfortable with each other in a way that spoke of time spent together. Vincent laughed at something the officiant said, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months, maybe longer. I tried to remember the last time he'd looked at me with that kind of warmth. The woman touched his arm, affectionate and familiar. A wedding coordinator appeared from a side door, clipboard in hand, making notes about timing and positioning. This wasn't a casual run-through. This was a full rehearsal, complete with staff and scheduling. How long had this been planned? Vincent checked his watch, the expensive one I'd given him for our 8th anniversary. He said something to the woman that made her smile and nod. The coordinator gestured toward the pews, discussing seating arrangements. My hand started shaking first, a tremor I couldn't control no matter how tightly I pressed them together. Then my chest constricted, each breath requiring conscious effort like I'd forgotten how breathing worked. My legs felt disconnected from my body, heavy and distant. I should leave. I should confront him. I should do something other than stand here frozen against cold stone, watching my husband prepare to marry someone else. But I couldn't move. My mind raced through possibilities, trying to find an innocent explanation that didn't exist. Maybe this was a favor for a friend. Maybe he was standing in for someone. Maybe I'd misread the board and that wasn't actually his name. But I knew his posture, his gestures, the way he tilted his head when he was happy. That was Vincent. My Vincent. Except he clearly wasn't just mine anymore. The woman laughed again, the sound echoing off vaulted ceilings. She wore an engagement ring that caught the light when she moved. A coordinator walked past me without a second glance. The wedding coordinator approached me with a warm, professional smile, her tablet tucked under one arm. She wore a navy dress and sensible heels, her name tag reading Bethany in cursive letters. "Are you here for the Lowell Stevens rehearsal?" she asked pleasantly, as if my presence was expected. I opened my mouth but no sound emerged. My throat had closed completely, words trapped somewhere behind my ribs. She waited patiently, that polite smile never wavering. "The bride's family is gathering in the side room if you'd like to join them," Bethany continued, gesturing toward a door to my left. "We'll be finishing up here in about 20 minutes. Then everyone's heading to the restaurant for the rehearsal dinner." I managed a small nod, not trusting my voice. She smiled again and returned to her position near the altar, making notes on her tablet. She thought I belonged here. She'd invited me to join the bride's family without hesitation, assuming I was part of this wedding party. What role did they think I played? A distant relative? A family friend? My name is Miranda Lowell, though I was Miranda Chen before I married Vincent 9 years ago in a small ceremony at the courthouse downtown. We'd planned a bigger celebration later, something with family and friends, but life got busy and we never got around to it. Vincent worked in commercial real estate development, long hours that paid well enough for our comfortable life in Northeast Portland. I managed operations for a small non-profit focused on youth literacy programs, work I loved despite the modest salary. We didn't have children, something we'd discussed but kept postponing. Our marriage had been solid, or so I'd believed. We had dinner together most nights, shared a bed, talked about our days. Vincent traveled occasionally for work, conferences and site visits that sometimes lasted several days. I'd never questioned those trips. We'd been together for 11 years total, married for 9 of those. I thought I knew this man. I thought I understood our life together. When had my marriage split into 2 separate existences? When had Vincent started living a completely different life? 3 weeks ago, Vincent had told me about a work conference in Seattle, Friday through Sunday, some development summit he needed to attend. He'd seemed distracted that week, busy with preparations, staying late at the office multiple nights. I'd packed his suitcase myself, the navy one he preferred for short trips, folding his shirts the way he liked them. He'd kissed me goodbye Friday morning, coffee mug in one hand, travel bag in the other. "I'll call you tonight," he'd promised, already scrolling through his phone. "Love you." He had called briefly both Friday and Saturday evenings. Background noise suggested hotel lobbies and restaurant settings. Nothing unusual. Nothing that raised suspicion. He'd come home Sunday afternoon with conference materials and business cards, telling me about presentations he'd attended and contacts he'd made. I'd listened while preparing dinner, asking appropriate questions, believing every word. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married 9 years. You don't question your husband's work trips after 9 years of marriage. What else had I accepted without question? What other lies had I swallowed whole, trusting and unsuspecting? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and searched the name I'd seen on the rehearsal board. Lowell Stevens' wedding. Social media provided answers within seconds. Her name was Vanessa Stevens, 32 years old, an architect at a firm downtown. Her profile showed photos of her and Vincent together, dozens of them dating back 8 months. They'd been to restaurants I recognized, hiking trails we'd visited, even the coast where Vincent and I had spent our 5th anniversary. In the photos they looked happy. Couple happy. The kind of photos you post when you're building a life with someone. Her bio mentioned being engaged, planning a wedding, excited for the future. 8 months of public documentation of a relationship I'd known nothing about. Comments from friends congratulated them, asked about wedding details, celebrated their love story. Vanessa's mother had commented on several photos, welcoming Vincent to the family. Nobody questioned whether he might already have a family. Nobody asked if he was free to marry. Did Vanessa know I existed? Had Vincent told her he was already married? Or had he simply erased me from his narrative? 6 months ago, Vincent had suggested we open separate checking accounts in addition to our joint account, something about tax advantages and clearer financial tracking for his work expenses. He'd explained it carefully, showing me articles about financial planning for couples, making it sound reasonable and modern. I'd agreed without much thought. We'd kept the joint account for shared expenses like mortgage and utilities, but moved our individual incomes into separate accounts. Vincent handled his own credit cards, his own investments. I'd seen it as trust, as maturity in our marriage. Now I understood it differently. A separate account meant separate transactions I'd never see. Hotels I wouldn't question. Jewelry purchases I'd never notice. A whole financial life hidden behind the reasonable explanation of tax planning and professional expenses. I pulled up our bank app, looking at the joint account we still shared. Regular deposits for his half of the mortgage. Utilities, groceries. Everything appeared normal, routine, exactly what you'd expect from a married couple managing shared expenses. What was he hiding with money I couldn't access? I scrolled through my calendar, comparing dates with Vanessa's social media posts. The Seattle conference 3 weeks ago matched a post of her and Vincent at a waterfront restaurant with the caption, "Weekend getaway with my love." The business trip to Sacramento in July aligned with photos of them at a wine tasting in Napa. His late nights at the office in September coincided with her posts about cozy dinner dates and movie nights. Every work excuse had been a lie. Every late meeting had been time with her. The trips duplicated perfectly. Business travel transforming into romantic getaways with a woman who thought she was his only future. I found the conference materials he'd brought home from Seattle, official programs and name badges from the summit he'd supposedly attended. Had he actually gone to any sessions, or had those materials been props to support his story? The lies stacked neatly, each one carefully constructed to cover the previous deception. This level of planning wasn't accidental. This wasn't a casual affair that had gotten out of hand. I searched Vincent's name with Vanessa's address, something I'd never thought to do before. Property records showed a lease agreement for an apartment in the Pearl District, signed 4 months ago. Vincent's name appeared on the lease alongside Vanessa's. I drove there directly from the chapel, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The building was new, expensive, all glass and modern angles. I sat in my car across the street, staring up at the third-floor corner unit. Through the windows, I could see furniture, curtains, the warm glow of table lamps. He'd furnished it. He'd created a home there, complete with the mid-century modern aesthetic he'd always wanted but I'd found too cold for our house. This wasn't a temporary arrangement or a secret meeting place. This was intentional, permanent planning. He'd signed a year-long lease, committed to monthly payments, built a life in that apartment with her. Our house, the one we'd bought together 6 years ago, must have felt like the temporary space to him now. I went home to our house in Northeast Portland, the craftsman bungalow we'd renovated together, and went straight to our filing cabinet in the home office. I found our marriage certificate in the folder labeled Important Documents, right where it had been stored since our courthouse wedding 9 years ago. The paper was still crisp, official, legally binding. State of Oregon. Marriage license and certificate. Miranda Chan and Vincent Alexander Lowell. The date written clearly in the county clerk's neat handwriting. I took photos of it from multiple angles, then made 3 copies on our home printer. The original went back in the filing cabinet. 1 copy went into my purse. 1 went into a separate folder I created, labeled Legal Matters. 1 I photographed and saved to a secure cloud account Vincent didn't know about. This piece of paper, this official documentation of our legal union, was the thing Vincent had apparently forgotten about in his planning. Or maybe he'd assumed I'd never find out, never interfere, never use it. This changed everything. This single document had the power to unravel whatever future he thought he was building. Monday morning, I called a family law attorney whose office was downtown, far from Vincent's usual territory. Her name was Diane Fletcher, and she had availability that afternoon. Her office was calm and professional, decorated in soft grays and blues that probably helped anxious clients feel less overwhelmed. I handed her the marriage certificate copy and explained the situation in a voice that sounded disconnected from my body, like I was describing someone else's life. Diane listened without interrupting, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied the certificate. "This marriage is legally valid and binding," she said, her tone matter of fact. "If your husband attempts to marry someone else without divorcing you first, he'll be committing bigamy, which is a felony in Oregon. The marriage license application requires disclosure of previous marriages. He'll have to either lie on a legal document or reveal that he's still married." She paused, tapping her pen against her notepad. "What happens if he tries to marry again?" "Yes. The system should catch it," Diane explained. "But we can ensure it does." That evening, I cooked dinner like nothing had changed. Chicken stir-fry with vegetables, one of Vincent's favorites. I set the table with our everyday dishes, poured water into glasses, acted out the routine we'd performed hundreds of times. Vincent came home at his usual time, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. "Smells good," he said, kissing my cheek automatically. We ate dinner making small talk about our days. Asked about work. He mentioned a difficult client and a project running behind schedule. Nothing about wedding planning or rehearsals or the life he was building with someone else. I smiled and nodded, eating mechanical bites of food I couldn't taste. After dinner, we watched television together on the couch. His arm around my shoulders in a gesture of casual affection. He checked his phone periodically, probably texting Vanessa, but I didn't ask. We went to bed at 11, our normal time. He fell asleep quickly while I lay awake in the darkness, listening to him breathe, wondering how long I could hold this knowledge inside without it destroying me from within. How long could I act normal while everything had changed? The digital invitation arrived in my email Wednesday morning, forwarded by mistake from Vincent's work account. Someone named Andrew had sent it to a distribution list that apparently included both Vincent's work and personal emails, and our shared email account we rarely used anymore had caught the spillover. You're invited to celebrate the marriage of Vanessa Stevens and Vincent Lowell. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, October 14th, at St. Augustine's Chapel, ceremony at 4 o'clock, reception to follow at the Riverside Ballroom. 2 weeks away. I stared at the elegant digital design, scrolling through details about parking and accommodations and meal choices. An RSVP link requested confirmation by October 1st. The invitation included a photo of them together, Vanessa's head on Vincent's shoulder, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. They looked genuinely happy, like people building something real together. The wedding date was set. Everything was arranged. Venue booked, guests invited, future planned. In 2 weeks, my husband intended to marry another woman while still legally married to me. Unless I stopped it. I researched Oregon marriage license requirements thoroughly, reading through state statutes and county clerk guidelines. The application process required both parties to appear in person at the county clerk's office. They had to provide valid identification and disclose any previous marriages. If either party had been previously married, they needed to provide documentation of how that marriage ended. Divorce decree, annulment, or death certificate. The clerk's office then processed the application and issued the license, which was valid for 60 days. The officiant who performed the ceremony would complete the license and return it to the clerk's office for registration. Oregon law required that both parties be legally free to marry. A marriage performed when one party was still legally married to someone else was void from the beginning. Bigamy was a Class C felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $125,000 fine. I printed out the relevant statutes and filed them in my expanding legal folder. The venue would need verification that the marriage license was valid and properly obtained. One document properly filed could stop it all. The system had safeguards built in. I called St. Augustine's Chapel on Thursday morning, asking to speak with their event coordinator. Bethany answered, her voice professionally cheerful. I identified myself as someone with questions about wedding requirements and legal verification. We require couples to submit their valid marriage license at least 3 days before the ceremony, Bethany explained. The officiant needs to review it and ensure all documentation is in order. We can't perform a ceremony without proper legal authorization. I asked what would happen if a license was submitted but later flagged as invalid. We'd have to cancel the ceremony immediately, she said, her tone turning serious. We have legal liability if we perform a marriage that isn't valid. If there's any question about the license's legitimacy, we postpone everything until it's resolved. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I called the Multnomah County Clerk's office and asked to speak with someone in the marriage license division. The conversation was quiet and professional. I explained my situation. They took notes. I provided my marriage certificate number. The process had begun. The system was now watching for Vincent's attempt to obtain a marriage license. 7 days before the scheduled wedding, Vincent became noticeably anxious. He checked his phone constantly, his knee bouncing during dinner, his attention scattered. He snapped at me twice about minor things, then immediately apologized, blaming work stress. He stayed late at the office 4 nights in a row. When he was home, he was physically present but mentally elsewhere, responding to my questions with distracted one-word answers. I maintained my routine, acting unconcerned, giving him space for whatever was consuming his attention. Saturday morning, 1 week before his planned wedding to Vanessa, Vincent received a phone call that made his entire body go rigid. He stepped onto our back porch to take it, but I could see him through the kitchen window, his free hand running through his hair repeatedly, his expression shifting from confusion to panic. The call lasted 12 minutes. When he came back inside, his face was pale, his jaw clenched. "Everything okay?" asked, keeping my tone casual. "Work thing," he muttered, grabbing his car keys. "I need to go to the office." He left without kissing me goodbye, something he'd always done before, even during arguments. The county clerk's office had processed Vincent's marriage license application exactly as expected. He and Vanessa had applied on Monday, appearing together with their identification and required documentation. Vincent had indicated on his application that he'd been previously married, but stated the marriage had ended in divorce. He'd even provided what appeared to be a divorce decree, though I'd never signed one and our marriage had never been dissolved. The clerk's office, following standard protocol, had submitted the information for routine verification. The system had flagged the application immediately. My marriage certificate was still active in the state database. No divorce decree existed that matched his claim. The verification process had triggered an automatic hold on the license application pending investigation. The county clerk had called Vincent to inform him that there was a problem with his application, that he needed to provide additional documentation, that the license could not be issued until the discrepancy was resolved. That phone call on Saturday morning had been the county clerk explaining that his marriage license application had been denied. The system had caught what he'd tried to hide. His carefully constructed plan was unraveling because of a document he'd apparently forgotten existed. Vincent came home early Saturday afternoon, something he never did on weekends when he had work obligations. I was reading in the living room when I heard his car in the driveway. He came through the front door like a storm, his face flushed with anger and something else, fear maybe or panic. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight and controlled. I set down my book and waited. He paced in front of the fireplace, running his hands through his hair, the gesture I recognized as his tell when he was trying to figure out how to spin a situation to his advantage. "Someone's been interfering with my life," he started, his tone accusatory. "Someone contacted the county clerk and made false claims about my marital status." I remained silent, watching him. "This is insane," he continued, his voice rising. "Whoever did this is trying to sabotage my future. They're making up lies about some supposed marriage that doesn't exist. It's harassment." I let him talk, watching the panic build behind his eyes as he realized his explanations weren't landing. Finally, he stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "It was you," Vincent said, the accusation hanging between us in our living room. "You did this. You're trying to ruin everything." I stood up slowly, keeping my movements calm and deliberate. "I didn't ruin anything, Vincent. I just didn't participate in your fraud." His face went through several expressions: confusion, denial, then dawning realization that I knew everything. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice dropping. "About Vanessa. About the wedding." "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to make sure you couldn't commit a felony." He actually laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "A felony? Miranda, don't be dramatic. People separate all the time." "But they divorce first," I said quietly. "They don't plan second weddings while still legally married to someone else. They don't forge divorce documents and lie on legal applications." Vincent's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You're being heartless. Calculating. This isn't like you." "No," I agreed. "The old me would have confronted you the moment I found out. Would have cried and begged for explanations. But I learned from watching you plan this. Sometimes calculation is necessary." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. The venue cancellation came through on Monday morning. St. Augustine's Chapel sent a formal email to both Vincent and Vanessa, explaining that due to irregularities with the marriage license application, they could no longer host the ceremony. The deposit would be returned, but the contract was void. The Riverside Ballroom followed within hours, their cancellation citing the same legal concerns. By Monday afternoon, Vanessa knew the truth. I didn't have to tell her. The county clerk's office had contacted her as part of their investigation, informing her that Vincent was still legally married to someone else. Her social media posts disappeared first, all the couple photos deleted in a span of minutes. Then came a single post, simple and direct. Wedding cancelled. I've learned some difficult truths. Thank you to everyone who supported us. Vincent called me 17 times Monday evening. I let every call go to voicemail. His texts progressed from angry to desperate to pleading. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just destroy my life. Please, Miranda. Let me explain. I blocked his number after the 17th text. Diane Fletcher had already filed divorce papers that morning. He'd be served at work on Tuesday. Vanessa left him within 48 hours. I knew because Vincent showed up at our house Wednesday evening, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging differently on his frame. Can I come in? He asked, standing on the porch of the house we'd bought together. This is still legally my house too. I stepped aside and let him enter. He sank onto the couch like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. She's gone, he said, his voice hollow. Vanessa moved out of the apartment. She blocked my number. She won't talk to me. I waited, neither sympathetic nor cruel, just present. The firm is investigating me for the forged divorce documents, he continued, words spilling out. They're saying it's an ethics violation. I could lose my license to practice. Everything is falling apart. You built your plan on lies, I said quietly. What did you expect would happen when the truth came out? He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I thought you'd never find out. I thought I could just start over, and you'd eventually move on and we'd both be happier. You thought wrong. He had nowhere to go. The apartment lease was in both his and Vanessa's names, and she'd changed the locks. The divorce was finalized 8 weeks later, faster than usual because Vincent didn't contest anything. Diane Fletcher had structured it cleanly and precisely. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and my car. Vincent kept his retirement accounts, his car, and his debts. We split our joint savings account 50-50. No alimony, no extended negotiations, no prolonged legal battles. Vincent signed the papers without asking for modifications. His real estate license was suspended pending the ethics investigation, which had expanded to include questions about his financial disclosures and client dealings. Apparently, his pattern of deception extended beyond his personal life. The firm had terminated his employment after discovering irregularities in several transactions. He'd moved back in with his brother in Beaverton, working temporary jobs while trying to salvage his career. I kept my job at the nonprofit, my routines, my life that had existed independent of his deceptions. The divorce decree arrived in the mail on a Tuesday afternoon. I filed it in the cabinet next to our marriage certificate, legal bookends to a chapter that was finally completely closed. The payoff wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet and controlled, exactly how I'd managed everything since the moment I saw his name on that rehearsal board. Vincent tried to contact me twice after the divorce finalized. Once through his brother, asking if we could talk things through and find closure. Once through a mutual friend, suggesting we meet for coffee to part on better terms. I declined both requests politely but firmly. There was nothing to talk through, no closure conversation that would change what had happened or explain away 9 years of marriage that had meant something entirely different to each of us. I'd said everything I needed to say in those final moments in our living room. The rest was just silence. I blocked his email and removed him from all social media. I changed my emergency contacts and updated my insurance beneficiaries. I legally changed my name back to Miranda Chen, reclaiming the identity I'd set aside when I'd believed in our shared future. The absence of contact was peaceful. No late-night texts asking me to reconsider. No dramatic confrontations or attempts to win me back. Just clean, complete separation. He was building whatever life he could from the wreckage of his choices. I was building mine from the foundation that had always been there, stronger for having been tested. Who was I without carrying his secrets? I was discovering the answer slowly, deliberately, one quiet day at a time. 6 months after the divorce, I was promoted to executive director at the nonprofit. The position came with increased responsibility and a salary that finally matched my worth. I hired 2 new program coordinators and expanded our literacy initiatives into 3 additional schools. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I'd forgotten work could be. I bought out Vincent's half of the house, refinancing in my name only, making it completely mine. I repainted the bedroom in colors I'd always wanted, replaced furniture that carried too many memories, created spaces that felt like they belonged to my future rather than our past. I reconnected with friends I'd gradually lost touch with during my marriage, rebuilding a social life that existed independent of being someone's wife. I traveled to places I'd wanted to visit, made decisions without checking with anyone else, learned what I actually wanted when no one else's preferences mattered. Vincent had planned a second wedding while married to me, constructing an elaborate life built on deception and forged documents. But I'd planned my exit with the same careful attention to detail, using the one thing he'd forgotten about, our marriage certificate, to stop everything and reclaim my future. He'd underestimated me completely, and I'd learned I was stronger than I'd ever known.